This is Smithy.tv.
Reporting for Katie Chats here at Smithy TV in downtown Toronto with author Stephen Pearl. What inspired you to become a writer?
Oh man. Basically, books saved the life of a very depressed, lonely teenage boy. And as they were doing that, I kind of realized that they had an incredible power. And I wanted to access that power. I wanted to not only read the stories that had inspired me, such as the works of J.R. Tolkien, that gave me my moral code, but I wanted to give something back to it. So I wanted to start creating my own stories. And I was always one of these kids who, I never fell asleep easily. So I would go to bed and I'd tell myself bedtime stories to kill the time until I actually nodded off. So I sort of evolved that over and started, instead of just telling bedtime stories, I sit up in the middle of the day and tell bedtime stories.
Tell me a little bit about your book, Tinker's Plague.
Tinker's Plague is a post-apocalyptic medical political thriller set in the Guelph area of southern Ontario. It's 100 years after the generators stopped turning due to the exhaustion of fossil fuels and environmental degradation. Two high-tech societies have held on around the old hydroelectric plants, Novagan and United Grid Regions. The Novagans have a program they call their Tinker program, where they send doctors of general applied technologies, tinkers, into the darklands, areas without electricity, to help them bootstrap themselves back to energy abundance through the use of wind, solar, wave, all the sustainables. Well, the tinker is out doing his route like he does every year when he comes to Guelph, only to discover that a couple of farmers have stumbled across an old bio research facility, gone in it to loot it, and accidentally brought out a plague. Now the tinker has to try to deal with that plague with his limited medical resources. Meanwhile, Novagan and United Grid Regions fight a Cold War battle over how much aid to give into the plague zone and how to maintain the quarantine around the plague zone. And the people in the plague zone just want to get the heck out of the plague zone, so they behave like a bunch of silly gits. You know, people are apt to.
Great. And so what inspired this whole story, or did you just come up with it?
Well, sustainable energy generation has been a hobby of mine since I was in my early 20s. So I wanted to do something that incorporated that information. I also happen to have been an emergency medical care assistant. I trained as one when I was much younger. So I had a lot of the medical background. And I just sort of looked, okay, if we don't do anything to fix the mess that we're making right now, where are we going to be in about 100 years' time? That was so negative. I just didn't want to go there. I mean, it is depressing. So I went another 100 years into the future where things were slowly starting to get better. They were slowly healing. And that's where I set my story. So everything in this book is a logical extrapolation of where we will be if we don't do things to deal with the problems that we are creating today. Well, not where we will be or where our descendants will be.
Okay. And you also have another book, I'm afraid I'm going to say this wrong, NUKEKUBI? NUKEKUBI. So tell me a little bit about that.
Number one, don't feel bad because I said it wrong for about 3 years while I was writing it. It wasn't until I started actually speaking to people who know Japanese that I found out how it was pronounced.
And there's two pronunciations,
yes,
right? Okay.
One in northern Japan, one in southern. Okay. It's one of those lingual shift things. NUKEKUBI are a form of Japanese goblin that during the day look like ordinary folk. At night, they separate their heads from their bodies, fly around, and scare people to death so that they can feed on the energies released. And these are actually drawn from Japanese mythologies. And I relate the myth of Kereru and the NUKEKUBI in the book as part of my lead character's researches. Well, Ray McAndrews, a modern-day Western wizard, encounters a NUKEKUBI that is feasting on the people of Toronto and decides that he has got to put a stop to this. Well, it soon becomes a question of just who's hunting who. And Ray gets a couple of allies in the form of Japanese goblins. Not Japanese goblins, I am terribly sorry. In the form of Japanese martial artists who have made hunting NUKEKUBI their life's work. Well, these East meets West, and they don't really get along that well. So Ray is often going, why do I have to have allies? Why do I have to have allies? Yes, they make it more likely I'm going to survive, but boy, this is a pain. And that's more or less how it gets started, and the hunt goes on. Ray's girlfriend is also, well, his on-again, off-again girlfriend is also involved, and she is an enchantress. She is a pagan sorceress. And she can kick some butt too, but unfortunately, just prior to this all starting, she has broken her ankle, so she's a bit on the sidelines.
Okay. And you frequent conventions and cons, as some might say. What exactly goes on? What exactly do you contribute when you go?
Well, more or less, I'm just falling down on my knees going, please buy my book, please buy my book. Well, it's more than that. When I'm at a con, I usually do panels. So we'll be discussing various aspects of writing, modern technology. I've been on a huge number of panels about sustainable energy generation and what we're going to do with fossil fuels slowly running out. Panels about how to write, the various elements of it. A lot of panels on how to promote, which in the modern writing structure, it's as important as anything else because nobody has money for promotion anymore. So it's all fallen onto the author to do it. So there's a lot of that educational aspect. There's, I normally have a table, and my wife and I will man that table, and that's where the begging them to buy your books comes in. It's one of the major outlets for, if you want to get a signed copy of a book, go to a con.
And is it fun seeing all the fans there in costumes and whatnot?
It's a hoot. You know, it's, well, I was in the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism, for about 9 years. So we would dress up in medieval clothing and act things out and so forth. So it kind of harkens back to that. So for me, there's a bit of a nostalgia aspect to it. It's also, okay, I'm going to sound like a real perv, a real dirty old man, but there is much to be said for a fit 20-something body in a superhero costume. I'm sorry. I'm proud of my Y chromosome. I try not to be a pig about it, but come on. Yeah.
And you're also a student of the paranormal. When did you develop that interest?
I've studied paranormal things since I was about 14. And basically, my main focus is pagan metaphysics. But I've also worked as a professional psychic. I'm a pretty mean tarot reader. Reasonable with the runes too. And it's more or less I've done a little bit of ghost busting. Not a great deal. There's far less called for it than you think there would be. Most of the stuff is hoaxes. But on the occasions that they aren't, it's nice to know somebody who actually has studied.
Absolutely. And what's next for you? What are your goals for the future?
Well, right now I've just had a new anthology come out. It's the Hot Shots anthology, which is a rather risque piece. I have 2 books coming out next year. One is one of my older works that I haven't found a home for it, so I'm putting it out as a self-published book. My other books have all been through a third-party publisher. This is my first foray into the self-publishing world. And it's called Havens in the Storm, and it's more or less classical fantasy. I have another book coming out through Dark Dragon Publishing, which is Worlds Apart, which is a paranormal romance. A wizard from a parallel Earth where the laws of physics are slightly different and magic works like it does in the storybooks. Travels to our world to try to stop a blight that is destroying his. Well, he gets here to encounter Elsina, a second-degree Wiccan priestess, who is in a custody battle for her son with the boy's estranged father, who left her while she was pregnant, and the fanatical cult that is backing him. And it's more or less, he helps her save her son. She helps him save his world. And in the process, they fall in love. It's actually set in the town of Bakewell in Derbyshire, England, which is my wife's hometown. So I've spent quite a bit of time there, and I got to use a lovely little stone circle as one of my settings that's right in that area called the Nine Ladies. And beautiful place, lovely parkland around it. It really, the boulders are about hip high, which is typical of most stone circles. The really big ones like Avebury and Stonehenge are the exception rather than the rule.
And where's the best place to find out more information on you and all of your work online?
That would be my website, www.stephenpearl.com. So www.stephenpearl.com.
Okay.
Stephen with a PH.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stephen. Congratulations on all of your success, and best of luck in the future.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the interview.
Absolutely. I'm Katie Allman reporting for Katie Chats here at Smithy TV in downtown Toronto.